are associated with more hypoxia because of all the death of what's produced. With that, I am going to head out. I want to thank all of you, though, for for caring so much and taking your time to come out. I was really surprised to see such a huge turnout, and I thank you for making this really worth our while to come out and being a good audience. So thanks.
Thank you, Ashley. It's May's bedtime, and that's where Mom is going. So it's past her bedtime. But Eric's going to stay. And Kathy, you've got a question. It looks like that a couple of them. Let's address.
Let me see this one.
And when Eric comes in, we'll catch him.
So just to make sure that it was discussed enough, this one is about PFAS and what can be done if they're known to be harmful but no regulations yet exist. And on the slide earlier, I showed the Michigan Environmental Council, and it looks like they have some really solid recommendations that they're making to the state of Michigan, Eagle, for the standards. And they're going a little bit beyond what Eagle is doing with recommendations. So I would just say if you're concerned about that, that's one good place to go is MEC or Michigan Environmental Council.
Hey Kathy, freshwaterfuture.org has low-cost kits for testing for homeowners. So look at freshwaterfuture.org and they have information as well, but they also have a low-cost testing option that you can use.
Okay, so freshwaterfuture.org for the low-cost testing materials that you may be able to use for your home, your tap water. Okay, and then another question is are there ways we can mobilize neighbors to help deal with? And then it said the consequences. I'm not sure what the consequences are that are in here. But, working together with neighborhood associations or shoreline associations, lake associations, neighborhood groups, watershed groups is always a good thing because you get a lot more done working together. So I would just encourage that no matter what the topic is or the consequences are. There's in the White Lake area, I think there's an association. There's the White River Watershed Partnership. There's probably a lot of other groups I don't know about. Muskegon Lake has the Muskegon Lake Watershed Partnership. Nearly every river, I think, in Michigan has some type of a watershed group, almost. And we are starting to convene the watershed groups in the 5-county area of West Michigan now at our office. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with a number of different watershed groups: Pentwater, Pere Marquette, White, Muskegon, Duck Lake, Mona Lake, and some others. And we want to identify what the issues are, what the needs are, and make plans, and then that way we can seek grants and other ways to implement solutions. Another question here was about fracking laws and expansion of fracking and if it's threatening our groundwater and our lakes. And I feel like fracking just sort of went away or something, but it probably didn't. I mean, does anyone else know what's happening with fracking? Because it was pretty hot for a while, but it seems like maybe the economy of it was not as desirable as originally thought. They're still doing it?
They're still doing it. They're doing it secretly.
Okay, so they're doing it, but they're doing it secretly. So I don't know a lot about fracking. I don't know if anyone else does. I know about it, but I don't know if it's really happening.
Fracking?
Basically tie fracking with the price of gas at the gas station. What happened was that fracking was so successful that it created a glut of oil in the market, and so new oil field development declined. And that's why fracking's declined, is because the market got saturated.
Okay.
So that situation could change.
Okay, so the market driven is it wasn't as economical or
You don't need to develop new, fracking is to develop a new oil field. You don't need a new oil field if you have a glut of oil in the market.
right. So probably none of the regulations have changed. It's just that there's a glut in the market, so things have slowed down a little bit.
We're still using wells for injecting the fracking waters into your.
So the regulations to inject the waste, those haven't changed.
All right, you had a question for Eric.
I do. You had mentioned pecan trees and shifting planting zones, temperatures. I'm just wondering, do you have any recommendations for different kinds of plantings for the warmer climate, or as the climate becomes warmer and it's wetter? Any suggestions? I just got through planting a copper beech. I don't know if that was a good idea now, if it's going to have a good future. You know, maybe I should have planted a pecan tree. Is there an online source that you would recommend that could just say, if you're thinking 30 years from now, you should be planting these trees?
So I'm going to twist the answer just slightly because I'm not necessarily in the horticultural trade, but I'm in the native plants part. And so many of the native plants that we use in our restorations, including our trees, can handle, we use them because they can handle a range of conditions. So they're actually, you can use a lot of the native plants that are available to you, and they'll work into the foreseeable future. Now, some of them maybe not. There might be some temperature range, but in the most part, you'll be fine. And if you're curious on that list of plants and maybe a description of them as well, if you go to the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership website, then you can, there's a link that you can go to that will fill you in on where, like, so in the upland area, so dry area, in the buffer zone where it gets wet and dry, and then in the totally wet area, and they'll give plant recommendations that are all native to Michigan.
All right, Carol?
Yeah, many of us don't live on the shoreline, but we live in swampy areas. And like in Giles and River Road, and our front lawns and our ditches were overflowing for 4 months. We couldn't flush our toilets, things like that. They've said people were pumping their sump pumps into the ditches, which the road commission says, don't you dare do that anymore. I mean, the people on Peterson Road were beside themselves. They couldn't even drive into their driveways. What can be done about things like that?
We have a community planner in the house, right? Because that's actually, you know, so I'll speak just, it's unfortunate that we didn't do better planning in the past, because then we could look at our landscape and where we're going to live and expand and look at it differently, where we can say these low areas may be our parks, but those low areas are going to maintain the, you know, and help with our flooding and just keep people from having to spend tremendous amounts of their income in helping, you know, protect their homes.
Houses that were all 1950s houses.
Right.
So
And
they didn't know.
And then the hard part is, so in that area is a lot of septic systems. That's why you can't flush your toilet. And it's a pretty heavily residential area, correct? The question that we can ask today is, why is there not a sewer? Why is there not a sewer line in a heavily residential area? So I know the answer is it's very expensive, and there's things like that. And there's logistics that make it very expensive. But we can still, even though something's really expensive, doesn't mean, and Kathy's great at, you know, just because something's expensive doesn't mean we can't ask that question and start saying, should we pursue it?
We have a question in the back. I'd like to ask what high school?
Whitehall.
Whitehall High School. Stand up, please, and ask your question.
Okay, so with what you guys work on, are you concerned with anything to do with agriculture and how it affects our water?
Yeah, so many of our actions on our watersheds impact water. And so one of those, just like what Ashley was alluding to, is agriculture. So when you till up the soil, you're now opening it up to erosion. While those soil particles hold nutrients, they hold sediment themselves, which is a pollutant. It can hold heavy metals, all those sorts of things. And then we are also applying fertilizers or manure to that soil over and over again to get a good yield. And so there's lots of depends here. So yes, what we've seen is agriculture does impact our water quality. We can put in practices, though, that mitigate and diminish those impacts. And then there's a whole host, if the USDA NRCS, so United States Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service, and FSA, the Farm Service Agency, gets money from the Farm Bill to help farmers put in best practices that help reduce nutrient runoff and a whole host of other things that come with agriculture.
All right. New questioners. Let's start with this gentleman, and then we'll go to you, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy.
Well, I just also wanted to say a lot of things are market driven. We talked about how fracking has changed. You know, buy organic, you know, make sure that where your food is coming from are from farms that have best practices on the ground already. That's not always easy to do. You have to do a little investigation and research, but I think that helps.
Okay, sir.
Two comments, not really a question. In Montague, we do have a boat washing station at the municipal boat ramp. If you have a boater coming to visit you, make sure that they wash in and out of the lake. You know, give them a pep talk. The second thing on your question of what to plant and where and native species, right closer instead of a website, use the Muskegon Conservation District as a resource about what plants work in the low and close to the water and in the upland and so on. They have a list of those, and if there's something you want but you don't know where to get it, they can get it for you. It's part of what they do, is to be able to order specific plants for a purchaser. So, and that's up on Holton Road, northeast from Myers and Tractor Farm store.
Very constructive comments. And let's go with your question, ma'am.
Eric, you had lake management under yours, and just a few comments from you. What do you think about aeration on inland lakes as far as handling weeds and muck? Is that, I know several lakes are doing that. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So the question was about how effective is aeration for the management of lakes when in regards to aquatic plants and muck and algae. Is that okay? So aeration is when we say aeration, there's lots of different ways to use aeration, and there's lots of different goals to go there. So aeration works really well in lakes that have winter kills where fish die. And so if the goal is to keep fish alive during the winter, you can have aeration to keep them alive. There's lots of evidence that it works and all these sorts of things. There is little to no evidence that aeration impacts aquatic plants. When we think about the method, so aeration is using either oxygenated air or just air pumped into the water in different diffusers that bubble up through the water, putting oxygen into the water. So that's the basic mechanism of it. Putting oxygen in the water, how would that affect plants? The mechanism isn't there, and so there's little to no evidence that that's the case. The only evidence that it would impact aquatic plants is if the diffuser, where the bubbles come out, is put in the lake incorrectly, and it actually kicks up the sediment up into the water column, which can happen and is a frequent mistake when putting in aeration into a lake.